how close do you think we are to a ceasefire in Gaza, and why or why not do you think we are close?
So I think definitions matter here.
Yeah.
We're a long way from ceasefire as it's traditionally understood, is my perception, my belief at this point. I think ceasefire in terms of a cessation of hostilities, adequate access to everything that's required for, the continuation of life in Gaza, which is healthcare, food, um, all of that, would have been possible with a Democratic, I think, administration. Biden, for various reasons, which I'm sure we'll learn over the next few years, but sided strongly with the Israelis and worked to undermine the possibility of a ceasefire, as it's traditionally understood. Today, it seems clear that Trump and the people in his orbit are either extremely enthusiastic about Benjamin Netanyahu and kind of the Israeli leadership, because it's not a one-man show, Israeli leadership's approach to exterminating the Palestinians in Gaza, or they're just bored, which is what Trump sometimes projects into the world. So there may be a relative cessation of hostilities. I mean, we're at a stage today, 21 months into the genocide, where 100 Palestinians are killed almost daily, 80 people, 50 people, 100 people, 150 people. And it doesn't register in the New York Times, which is a problem. And so a relative, cessation of hostilities today could mean that the Israelis can kill 20 or 30 people a day for an indefinite period of time while they build the camp that they've described as a humanitarian camp in Rafah, which I think many of us and journalists and edits and elsewhere have described as a concentration camp. And the world, at least here in the United States, in Washington, D.C., people in positions of authority may shrug and kind of seek to move on. So we may end up in that scenario where the endless grind continues, reverts to what it was on October 6, 2023, where the existing conditions are obviously a lot worse in Gaza, but where it's a low grade from the point of view of the Israelis and their supporters conflict, that may be in the offing. But a
Mm,
ceasefire in the ordinary
mm,
sense of the word, I don't believe that's going to happen anytime soon.
mm. Yeah, Ahmed, I really appreciate you saying that actually, because I think you're really right, and I may have fallen into it too. That the word use of language here can be very problematic, which is to say, I don't think there's. I mean, again, Mairav, tell me if you think I'm wrong. I don't really think there's anyone's talking about a situation in which Israel even evacuates all of its troops from Gaza, right? I mean, even under what we would call a ceasefire, Israel would be maintaining, even under the most kind of, Israel would be maintaining a perimeter of control inside Gaza that was significantly larger than what they had before October 7th, right? And that's not even, I think, in dispute, really, so let alone questions about access. So I think you're right. You're really right to kind of reframe the conversation. Mairav, what do you think? If we are talking more, if it makes more sense to think about the war entering a kind of a different phase than we have been in, what do you think the coming weeks are likely to hold, and how do you think things are likely to change, whether we call it a ceasefire or not?
Well, I just want to echo what Ahmed said, which is that, the language that we use and the way that we understand ceasefire has really changed over the last 2 years, and Israel has created a new model of ceasefire in which only one side ceases fire and the other side, Israel, doesn't. And I do think that Israel and Netanyahu specifically have really succeeded in making the bar so low that a temporary ceasefire in which not all fire is necessarily stopped is what we're going for now, and that we fall into this trap of thinking that things will get better. And I just want to also emphasize even more that even if Israel did pull all of its troops out, even if there was a full, flowing of aid, the situation in Gaza is so bad that there would still be people dying from, all of the different ailments and the lack of infrastructure, the lack of healthcare. So it's like, there's so many levels of stopping the harm that would need to happen before you could even talk about reconstruction. So a ceasefire is necessary, but it's like the bare minimum. And again, as Ahmed said, that kind of ceasefire, I think, is not the same one that we want to envision. So it's a very, very dark, dark and horrible reality to kind of think about. But in terms of the Israeli perspective, I think, that there's this kind of tension between what the army has said for months now that it wants, which is that it wants a hostage deal and an end to the current cycle. And then what the leading figures in the government and the ministers that run the government, specifically Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, but also Netanyahu, that they prefer to continue with the military, whatever you want to call it, occupation, genocide, all the things that are clearly happening on the ground. And so the split there is between like full-on military rule. And again, that's also a rhetorical language thing, right? Like Israel already controls and has controlled and has put under siege. So how much worse would that get? In the Israeli discourse, it's about soldiers not handing out bags of flour. So that's like the limit that the military is saying, like, we're not going to get anything out of doing that. And I mean, it has to be said also, Israel's losing soldiers, like daily. Obviously, it doesn't compare in proportion, but I mean, it doesn't cease to amaze me that no amount of soldiers dying and no amount of hostages being held is going to change the calculus in Israel, in terms of stopping this war. So, I mean, so the situation now is that, if we don't reach the ceasefire, and I'm actually I was putting my money on there being a ceasefire by the time this week ended. I thought that, Trump really wanted it and Netanyahu was in a place where he could do it. It looks like it might still happen. The 60-day, Witkoff plan that I'm assuming the audience understands what the terms are, but I can go over them. But basically, my sense is that still might end up happening. But Netanyahu might try to delay it till closer to the end of July when the Knesset goes into recess for several months, and then he really won't have any kind of problems with his coalition. So that might be the direction we go in. And like Ahmed said, in those 60 days, Israel could, create this kind of camp in the ruins of Rafah and try to push people down there and basically continue with its plan, even if there is some kind of, cessation of fire. Or none of that will happen. And then Israel will continue to destroy parts of Khan Yunis and Beit Hanun, I mean, and other areas of the strip that it hasn't done yet. So basically just it could either be bad or much, much worse. And then unfortunately, I don't see a course right now where things are going to get better unless we have a huge political engagement by the Trump administration that not only gets a ceasefire, but then really sustains its engagement on enforcing that ceasefire. And I don't see that happening. And then also having to also look at the terms of what a ceasefire would look like and and the kind of aid that could flow in, and then discussing what it would mean after the ceasefire is done. I mean, there's so many things to think about in terms of how that would look like, and there's no player right now. And unfortunately, the Arab players, whether it's Egypt or Saudi, their relations with the US are too precious for them to kind of, I think, push it more than they already are. So there's just nobody. There's nobody, I think, to take that step. So, I mean, we're just at the kind of, we're just hoping that Trump will get a ceasefire, but that's like the bare minimum.
I mean, Ahmed, my understanding of Hamas's position is that they don't want to release all the hostages until they feel like they have some credible assurance that the assault on Gaza is going to end. Now, I don't really know. And obviously Netanyahu is not wanted to do that. He's kind of, said basically, we'll stop attacking for a while if you give us hostages, and then we'll go back to attacking more. I don't really understand, even to be honest, what could be a credible guarantee that Hamas would be able to rely on that Israel would stop attacking. I mean, who could provide them that guarantee? And again, obviously you're not, you're not talking to the leaders of Hamas, but I'm just curious, what do you think their thinking is as they are engaging in these negotiations in Qatar and being, pushed around by the United States and demanded that they sign various agreements? What do you think their strategy is?
So I'm not talking to the leaders of Hamas, but Jeremy Scahill is of Dropsite News, and all of his reporting is in English, and I encourage everybody to check it out. And Arabic language media does share interviews and um, perspectives from within the Hamas leadership. I mean, lying carries an expense, even if you're the United States. The Trump administration has misrepresented every major initiative across the board to its counterparts, whether it's trade or JCPOA negotiations, or I guess whatever the current iteration of that is with Iran, or the prisoner trade with Hamas, Eden Alexander, and I may be mispronouncing the man's name. But when your counterpart is not regarded as a credible party, irrespective of how powerful that party is, that they're going to find it harder to get what they want. And I think it's appropriate to think not just of the Trump administration, but the Biden administration as having misrepresented American goals and American positions for the duration of this assault, for the past 21 months. And so you're right. If Hamas today is willing to say, so Hamas has, from the first days of the genocide, Hamas said, we'll give you all of your prisoners in return for cessation of hostilities and some release of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli prisons. And that's been turned down, a number of times.